Well, hello there. Welcome back to the Pacific War channel, where we cover the entire history of the Asia-Pacific War from 1937 all the way up to 1945, and all the major events that led up to it. Now, this is going to be the first part of a multi-part series on China's Warlord Era. Just wanted to take a moment to thank all of you. This channel just passed 10k subscribers. You guys are awesome. But if you've not already done so, please leave a like, subscribe, and a comment, as it helps this small but growing channel. Stating all of that, let's get on with the show, China's Warlord Era. As we had seen with my previous episodes on the Xinhai Revolution, the series on World War I in Asia, and the May 4th movement of 1919, China certainly was undergoing one of its most tumultuous periods in its entire history. China was still undergoing what is called the Century of Humiliation. Ever since the Opium Wars and countless other external slights, the people of China were dissatisfied to say the least. Now the Qing dynasty was overthrown during the Xinhai Revolution of 1911, ushering in the new Republic of China. But our old friend, Yuan Shikai, quickly wrestled control of the movement created by Dr. Sun Yat-sen, and seized the presidency of the new republic and would eventually elect himself emperor over the new Hongxian dynasty. Now the last 20 years of the Qing dynasty saw a steady decline towards decentralization and provincialism. Provincial military leaders known as Tuoquan, often backed by external players, exerted influence in their respective areas. Yuan Shikai's power came from his position as head of the Beiyang army, the only major military force in China at the time. Thus his Beiyang government was reliant upon military power rather than parliamentary methods. To maintain control, Yuan Shikai reorganized the provincial governments with military governors, Tuoquan, each in control of their own private army. Yuan Shikai became the de facto father of warlords, and at least 10 of these warlords that came to power later had originally served as officers within his Beiyang army. Then Yuan Shikai goes and dies, causing a power vacuum, and thus we have the Warlord Era. Thanks, Yuan Shikai. The Beiyang government henceforth basically served as to the whim of whichever warlord held the strongest army and largest presence within Beijing at any given time. Now leaderless, the Beiyang army broke apart. Its regiments and divisions fell under the control of various warlords in northern China, who claimed them for their own private armies. The warlords sought to increase their power by increasing the size of those said armies. This also resulted in the creation of major factions, better called cliques and alliances. Now it is simply impossible to talk about all the warlords in every facet of the Warlord Era in this short 3-part series. And as I just said that, I realized this is going to be about 7 episodes long, so it's a 7-part series now.
Nice.
I will do my very best to give a general telling of this chaotic mess, so please forgive me for not listing every single leader at any given time, because oh boy, they often change and there's a lot of them. So first, we want to separate the warlords into the northern factions and the southern factions. The major northern factions were the Anhui Clique, led by Duan Qirui, the Zhili Clique, led by Feng Guozhang in central China, and the Fengtian Clique, led by Zhang Zuolin in Manchuria. There were lesser ones, such as the Shanxi Clique of Yan Xishan, the Ma Clique of northwestern China, led by a multitude of Hui Muslim generals, the Xinjiang Clique, led by Yang Zengxin, and the Guomingjun, formed later on in 1924 from some disgruntled Zhili leaders. The major southern factions were the Kuomintang, led by Dr. Sun Yat-sen, who formed the Republican government in Guangzhou, the Chinese Communist Party, led by Chen Jixiu, the Yunnan Clique, led by Cai Ginyin, the Guangxi Clique, led by Li Zongren, and the Sichuan Clique, led by Liu Sang. There were also other warlords of Guizhou, Guangdong, and Hunan. When Yuan Shikai died, his Beiyang army split more or less into 3 main factions, the Zhili, Fengtian, and Anhui cliques. Their authority was based on their presence within Beijing. Li Yuanhong succeeded Yuan Shikai as president of the Republic of China, but the real political power was in the hands of Premier Duan Qirui. Basically Duan and others allowed Li Yuanhuang to be president because he was seen to be weak and controllable.
There'll be no knifing one another. Everybody knows who's in charge. Me. Right? Yes, you. Of course. Of course.
Duan Qirui was the previous Minister of War under Yuan Shikai, and a strong believer in Confucian values. He earned a strong following known as the Anhui Club within the Republican Parliament and led the Anhui Clique. The vice president, Feng Guozhang, had taken control of Gansu in 1916, and he was a former lieutenant under Yuan Shikai, playing a significant role in the 1911 revolution against the Manchu. He led the Zhili Clique, which initially was seeking stability in the capital by working with the Anhui Clique. Now you must remember, all of this was going down right in the middle of World War I, forming a rather awkward situation. There was a large political unrest over the question if China should participate in the Great War or not. Duan called for a full declaration of war on Germany and Austro-Hungary, arguing it would allow China to be given a seat at the peace table, and hopefully she could recover the former German colonies and prevent Japan from seizing them. Dr. Sun Yat-sen and his supporters in the south opposed the plan, and this issue forced him to break off from the Beiyang government and form his own republican government in Guangzhou. Li Yuanhuang likewise opposed the idea, because he feared Duan was going to use such a situation for personal gain. And lo and behold, Li found out Duan was forming secret dealings with Japan, so he fired him. The very angry Duan denounced it as illegal, and he left Beijing in protest to set up a base in Tianjin, taking most of his generals with him.
Meanwhile in Beijing,
because of the lack of military authority in Beijing, suddenly, General Zhang Xin offered his assistance to the situation, offering to mediate between Li and Duan. Zhang, however, was bringing with him a military backed by German funds and arms. Nicknamed the Pig-tailed General because he refused to cut his Manchu queue, Zhang Xu was a devout Qing monarchist, and he showed up to Beijing with an army of 5,000 men on July the 1st. Zhang's men quickly occupied the capital, and he dissolved the parliament, leaving Li to flee for his life, first to the French legation, then to the Japanese embassy. Zhang then shocked the entire country by placing Pu Yi as emperor of a restored Qing dynasty. The Beijing police submitted to the new government, and for 48 hours, tons of edicts were being tossed around, trying to shore up a Manchu restoration. Meanwhile, Li reappointed Duan as premier and handed over his presidency to Feng Guozhang. As acting president, Feng begged Duan to bring his military to stop Zhang. Duan Qirui immediately took command of the Republican troops stationed in Tianjin on July the 5th, and they seized the Beijing-Tianjin Railway. General Zhang came out of Beijing to meet the Republicans, but by this point, most of the northern cliques and their private armies opposed him, and he had no control over the two main railway lines going to the capital. By the 9th day of the supposed Manchu restoration, General Zhang resigned from his appointed positions as his forces were completely surrounded by the Republicans. Soon, the imperial court began to secretly negotiate with the Republicans to prevent an assault on Beijing. But by July the 12th, negotiations fell apart, and the Republicans announced a general assault. The attack began the next day, with Zhang's forces entrenched on the wall of the Temple of Heaven. Shortly after the fighting began, negotiations resumed, and General Zhang was forced to flee to the Dutch legation as his royalist forces called for a ceasefire. Zhang Xun would never participate in politics ever again. Li Yuanhuang was also fed up with politics, so he resigned from office on July the 17th, leaving Feng Guozhang to become the new president, and Duan Qirui tried to pick up the pieces where he had left off in Beijing. Duan got his wish for China to enter World War I, declaring war on Germany and Austro-Hungary. By entering the war, Duan planned to use the war as a cover-up for building up his own private army under the guise it was to fight the Central Powers. Yet the Beiyang government's credit was terrible, and the European wartime expenses made it both impossible to get Western funding. So Duan secretly negotiated for funding with the Japanese. This infamously became known as the Nishihara Loans. In exchange for the right for Japanese troops to be stationed in Shandong province and to build up railways there, Duan Qirui would receive funding to help build up his private Anhui military clique's army to conquer the other warlords controlling the south. Then, to the shock of Duan and all of China, at the Paris Peace Conference, the Allies gave Japan the former German colonies. China was humiliated at Paris, leading to the May 4th movement in 1919 in response to the anger towards a weak Beiyang government. To add insult to injury, the Japanese made the Nishihara loans public, completely destroying Duan's credibility. Nonetheless, Duan still exercised significant control over Beijing with his powerful army, and he still sought to use his army to hit the warlords in the south. However, Duan's Zhili Clique allies were continuously hindering his plans at a southern campaign. On top of this, because of the public sentiment towards Duan was so poor, the Zhili Clique and Fengtian Clique began to slowly organize an anti-Anhui alliance to oppose Duan. By 1919, the Anhui Clique was the strongest by far and controlled much of coastal China and the area around Beijing. Through the Nishihara loans, Duan was receiving funds, weapons, and military advisors from Japan. The Zhili Clique was receiving the same from Italy, and the Fengtian Clique were also receiving the same from Japan. Publicly, the Anhui Clique's ally was still the Zhili Clique, though its leaders continuously argued against a southern campaign, preferring instead a peaceful solution. President Feng Guozhang would die of illness on December the 12th of 1919, and the Zhili Clique would then be led by Cao Kun, who was backed up by an amazing military strategist named Wu Peifu. Like his predecessor, Cao Kun also favored a more peaceful solution, seeking to sway rival warlords to their side with financial and political support. Now, as World War I had been coming to an end, Duan had lost his credible reason to continue building up his Anhui military, and he had to find a new rationale to maintain it. He saw that Mongolia was currently without a foreign protector, so he sent his army to occupy parts of Outer Mongolia.
No. Wait. Wait.
It fit two major purposes. The first, it would allow him to rationalize having his own private army. The second, perhaps he could regain favor with the public after the disastrous leak of the Nishihara Agreement. Duan's right-hand man, General Xu Shujiang, commanded the Northwestern Frontier Army and personally led a spearhead of 4,000 troops right into Outer Mongolia, capturing Urga without any resistance. Soon, an Anhui army of 10,000 began to occupy the rest of the country, and their success was met with much acclaim throughout all of China, even amongst other warlords. However, one warlord was very unhappy about all of this. He was the leader of the Fengtian Clique, the powerful warlord of Manchuria, Zhang Zuolin. He viewed such a large Anhui army close to his territory as a threat. Zhang, known as the Tiger of the North, was a former bandit who had fought his way to power in Manchuria and Shandong province by splitting melons, which was his jolly euphemism for smashing his opponents' heads. Zhang and his bandit gang helped the IGA during the Boxer Rebellion and during the Russo-Japanese War, when they were employed by the IGA as mercenaries. The Japanese saw Zhang as a useful warlord to further their aims in Manchuria, so they helped build up his private army. Now, alongside Zhang, the dominant leaders of the Zhili Clique, Cao Kun and Wu Peifu, were both calling for a dissolution of the Anhui's giant military. The Fengtian and Zhili cliques soon formed an alliance, and had General Xu Shujiang dismissed.
I'm sorry, you're fired. Get out of here. Right?
This caused Duan to lose face, and he was not going to sit by idly. In fact, Duan made his first move by expressing his intentions to use the Anhui army against the Zhili army. Duan formed the National Stabilization Army using 5 divisions and 4 combined brigades. He deployed his forces in 2 fronts, the west covering the regions of Zhouzhou, Guo'an, and Laishu, and over in the east covering Hamlet, Beijing, Yang, and Liang. The Zhili gathered their 3rd Division and 9 combined brigades to form a traitor suppression army, with Wu Peifu as their frontline commander. The Zhili and the allies deployed two fronts similar to Duan, with an eastern front in the region of Yang and Hamlet, and a western front in the region of Gaobei. The Zhili war plan was to strike from the south, converging on Beijing, and then to hit Beijing. Meanwhile, the Fengtian gathered over 70,000 troops and they would strike into the northern Anhui-held territories through the Shanhai Pass of the Great Wall. Now, a crucial problem for the Anhui Clique would be the fact that the Zhili held control over Jiangsu province, which held an important railway that Anhui's army needed to move troops from north to south. On July the 14th of 1920, the Anhui army made the first move by simultaneously attacking both fronts. Zhili troops were forced to abandon Gaobei, and 2 days later, with Japanese assistance, the Anhui forces seized Yang and Hamlet, forcing the Zhili to form a second line of defense in the Beiyang region. It was at Beijing the Anhui forces were finally halted. On July the 17th, Wu Peifu personally took command of the Zhili Western Front, performing a daring maneuver. He outflanked the Anhui force at Zhou and proceeded to take the Western Anhui Army HQ. While this was going on, Wu Peifu's men managed to capture the Anhui frontline commander, Zhi Tongfeng, alongside other top-ranking officers. Wu Peifu then seized Zhou, sending the Anhui fleeing back to Beijing. With the exception of the Anhui 15th Division, their western front was all but annihilated. On July the 17th, the Fengtian army crashed into the Anhui Eastern Front, and upon hearing the news of the collapse of the Western Front, the Anhui Eastern Front commander, General Shi Shuzheng, fled to Langfang and then Beijing, leaving his troops to surrender to the combined might of the Fengtian and Zhili cliques. By July the 19th, Zuan finally realized he had lost, and resigned from his post as the combined Zhili-Fengtian forces entered Beijing by the 23rd. It was only a week-long battle, with an unexpected victory. Most of the defeated Anhui army defected to the Fengtian clique, as they snatched up Anhui's former northern provinces. Meanwhile, the Zhili snatched up more of China's central provinces, as Anhui held just a sliver of the coast now. But for all intensive purposes, the Anhui clique was all but done for. Alright, let's go over everything we've now just learned. The Warlord Era emerged at the end of World War I with the Beiyang government at the mercy of whichever warlord was the strongest at any given time. The Anhui Clique emerged the most dominant and sought to unify China under its own authority. But the Zhili-Fengtian Clique, they formed an alliance and they defeated the Anhui Clique, and now they formed a new joint government in Beijing. Really hope you liked the first episode of China's Warlord Era series. Please leave a like, subscribe, and leave a comment as it helps this small but growing channel. This has been the Pacific War Channel, over and out.